Have you ever wondered what it takes to become a truly impactful leader? In this episode, we'll explore practical strategies for cultivating leadership skills that can transform both your personal life and your professional life. Join us as we discuss some actionable insights and a few stories to help you become a more effective and influential leader. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Triangle's Making Money Personal podcast, where we engage in real talk about financial matters that affect our community. Today's episode is sponsored by Triangle Credit Union, recently voted Best Credit Union in New Hampshire.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Making Money Personal podcast. I'm Liz here with Kevin and Adriana Torres. How are you guys doing?
I'm wonderful. It's a beautiful day up there.
It is. Yay. How about you, Kev?
Doing well as well.
Great. That's awesome. I just want to, we're doing this episode. This is a part 2 for a leadership series that Adriana has joined us for. So we did part 1 prior for anyone who's listening in for the first time. We did part 1 prior. This is part 2. Before I advance further, though, I just want to make a note. If something sounds off with the audio, it's really just because we're recording virtual today and we're not in the podcast room. There's some construction going on in the building. So as of now, we're all calling in through Zoom. So Kev's got his headset on and Adriana's comfortable on the couch. So from this point, we'll move forward. As of Adriana, it was a little while ago, we did part 1 and we really wanted to talk about leadership, right? Leadership skills, how to develop that in our own lives. Part 1 kind of covered what is leadership, what are some of the common misconceptions of leadership that maybe a lot of people misunderstand. And in this episode, we want to go into how can people practically bring it into their lives? How can they learn to build these skills, right? So before we go into that, I just want to do a brief little recap again, for anyone who's new. Why is leadership important? That's really one of the big questions. Why is it important? Why are we covering this? And can anybody build leadership skills?
That's still a great question, Liz. And I don't know if you remember from last time, the way that we presented this two-part topic of leadership in this conversation was we're going to give you the kind of the appetizers first, right? This is going to be like a 5-course meal or a 3-course meal, but we're going to give the appetizers and then we're going to get you a little bit interested, a little bit your appetite for information and for this message going. And then we're going to dive into how to practically do this, right? So to recap a little bit on what we talked about in the first part of this leadership topic, we emphasize that leadership is something that matters always, right? And I'm going to say that it actually matters more now than ever because we live in a much more complex world. The challenges that we're facing are much more complex. So there is so much more at stake also than before for ourselves, for our future generations in many different aspects of our lives, right? And our businesses. So this is a belief that I have acquired in recent years, and it's something that is a core belief of mine, and is that leadership can be for everybody. Leadership can be for all of us. And it's really come down to making that choice. We all have that choice to lead not only our life in a way that supports our values or our purpose, our vision, but also to look around in the environments where we are at, where we work, where we live, where we interact with each other, and decide that we're going to make these intentional contributions to add more value, to improve the life of the people that are around us, to improve our environments. So that was part of what we talked about last time. And to me, this means that we can all be leaders. We can all be not only leaders, but effective leaders, because there is a difference between how we approach this concept of leadership, right? We talk about some myths that we debunked, because you know how I love to debunk me some good myth. And these are things that people hold, and they actually are going to become obstacles to be effective leaders. One of them, the first one that we touched up on, was that leaders have all the answers. That's not true. We're people as leaders that are learning like everybody else. We're human beings. There are situations more than ever that are new to us that we never navigated before. And we have to start finding solutions that don't come necessarily from the knowing all, but also from tapping into the resources that we have, our people, our teams, our communities, and is something that we have to take into account. We do not have to have all the answers. And that vulnerability of understanding and acknowledging that is so powerful too,
Yeah.
right? The second myth that we debunk is that it's about me. It's about the leader. Now, people in my team, their function is to make me look good. And this came from actually people telling me that my direct manager years and years ago uh, say that to me, and I never believed it. I'm like, really? Is that what you think? Because I think that there is a little bit of a change when you become a leader, or when you can be a leader anytime, right? But when you have a position or role that you're managing people, it doesn't become about you. It stops being about you. It becomes about them. So that's very important to keep into account. And also, there's this myth that being a leader is telling people what to do, right? That changes are going to be designed behind the scenes by leadership, and then they're going to be trickled down to the team. This one, actually, by the way, poses a huge problem because, and I'm going to borrow this concept from Simon Sinek, because guess what? I read the book and look at all these
Book.
marks
Oh
that
my
I get
goodness.
on it. The book Leaders Eat Last. He said that, when the people on top have all the authority, but very little information, and vice versa, the people on the bottom have all the information, very little authority, this is something that is not going to be effective. The solutions or the steps that are going to be taken are not going to be effective steps, for the organization and for the people. So I wanted to quote something that Kevin mentioned last time in the last conversation, because it's very exciting to have this message in recorded in a podcast, but there is a lot of good conversation that happens before and after this recording. I think Kevin mentioned that there is a quote from the Bible, if I correctly remember, and you can correct me on that if you want to be the greatest, and I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit here, you have to be the greatest servant, right? And to me, that encompasses really what it means to be an effective leader. And I don't know if, Kevin, you want to add a little bit more to that, because that came from you.
Sure. And you got the paraphrase correctly, because that was kind of what the that's what the spirit of what it says. And thank you for sharing that, because I think position of leadership, it has to be understood that just it encompasses the things you already said, that you're a servant to those that you lead, and understanding the position of authority is not so that you can lord it over people or you can hold it over people, but there's a tremendous responsibility that comes with the leadership that you're given, whether it's something that you work towards or something that is given to you. That it's important to remember that if you want to be the greatest leader, then you need to be the greatest servant, which means you're putting everyone before yourself, or to borrow Simon's title, you eat last, essentially. But the greatest leader is always others focused.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think he even mentioned in the book, I did some skimming. I didn't have a chance to read the whole thing, but I think he mentioned the importance of empathy, the value of empathy, and that comes along with the service side of it, right? Like in order for you to effectively serve others, you need to have an empathetic perspective, I would think. It helps, I would think at that point. So.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so leadership isn't necessarily easy. Building leadership skills isn't necessarily easy. I think that's probably some of the reason why it's difficult. Like it's challenging, and maybe some don't pursue it. So, what do you think? Adriana and Kevin too, feel free to weigh in. What are some of the common challenges and fears that people might be facing when they enter, in particular, like a leadership position? It doesn't have to be like a formal position at a job, but any leadership position. And how can they best prepare for some of those challenges? Maybe they're entering it now or they're trying to set themselves up to enter it in the future. What are some of the fears and challenges, and what are some of the ways that they can overcome those?
Definitely, Kevin, you want to take this on or you want me to start?
You can start, please. You're our guest, so.
Thank you. Thank you. So, definitely some common challenges that I see are the belief that these myths are perpetuating, right? Because again, as I said before, those beliefs are obstacles to effective
Mm,
leadership, right? And
yeah.
we are very conditioned many times by our environments to think of leadership in a more traditional way. For example, with the command and control and micromanagement style. And it has been proven over and over again that this approach actually erodes the fundamental
Mm,
elements that are needed to practice that effective leadership. They erode trust, engagement, energy and motivation, accountability, and even collaboration and teamwork.
mm,
So if we understand this, if we understand that it's not about us, it's about them, it's about service, right? I think that a better approach is a servant leadership approach. And to me, servant leadership is a practice of heart-centered leadership. That means that it is about, as Kevin mentioned before, putting the needs of others first, right? We eat
mm,
last, showing power and acting with integrity and courage, right?
mm,
All those are traits that are going to help us foster trust and collaboration within teams. A lot of people think that the most challenging aspect of leadership is dealing with people. You have to work with people when you're a leader, right? In those
mm,
positions. But I understand that it can be challenging to work with people because people are often unpredictable and they can really throw a lot of emotion in our days, right?
mhm. Yes.
But yes, I mean, that's something that, human beings, it's a human
Mhm,
factor, right? That we have to deal with. People are also very fascinating. People are valuable and powerfully creative. If we think about it, people's behavior is actually neutral for the most part. And it's the meaning that we attach to it that really gives life to that behavior. So once we understand this, we can also remain neutral ourselves, right? We can decide to be empathetic, to know that these people are going through something that maybe is something that is lingering, like a trauma, like a way that they have been acting in an environment that maybe was not a good environment for them. So there is always a good reason why these people are doing things this way, right? So understanding that is a great way of developing that effective leadership. And for example, when people are promoted and given a role as a manager, right? In a way, that's when the start of that journey starts, right? When they're developing into that person that is going to become an effective leader. And if you develop those traits, those qualities beforehand, because again, everybody can have a leadership role in their life, right? And in the life of others. You don't have to have a title or a role for that. I think that that's going to be an easier way of getting into those positions, right?
mm,
Um, and I would like to think of this in an analogy because, in the same way that, for example, when somebody turns 18 years old, they become an adult, right? But that doesn't mean that they already have all the tools to be an adult because the
yeah.
learning process is going to continue there, right?
Mm,
So if the managers understand they don't have all the answers, they need to create that psychological safety first, right? Is at the bottom of that pyramid. And if they are doing that within their teams, they're creating trust, they're maintaining trust. They are going to replace things like judgment and criticism with curiosity and understanding. Again, that
mm,
empathy is very important for that. And when you become vulnerable in front of your team, you say, hey, I don't have all the answers, but together we're going to find them, right? That's a great trait to develop because through that, you're going to gain that courage. You're going to become a more effective leader.
mm.
So
You know, I
definitely
really
has to
like your
start
point
from
about
within.
when
Hmm.
someone becomes an adult, there, it's not like all of a sudden all those adult skills are just downloaded into your brain. You still have to learn and it's still part of that process. So like the expectation that you're going to perform at your peak when you're new to something like a leadership position is, I mean, that's an unrealistic expectation. And I think to your point, Adriana, is like acknowledging that building skills that of empathy, building skills of service, building skills of heart-centered engagement, um, understanding your vulnerabilities of saying, I don't have all the answers. Those are all things people can practice ahead of time, right? And then it helps set them up um, into as they grow in their positions, those skills will be pretty much utilized, right? Now, Kevin, I'm curious about you. So you are an assistant branch manager right now, correct?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
as well as a podcast host with us. Um,
Assistant
so
podcast host.
so yeah, like as you advance, because you didn't start out there, right? You had to build to the position that you're in now. Was there anything unique about that journey that kind of stands out to you?
Yeah, so to answer the question that you had proposed before Adriana had carried us through there was, Adriana, you kind of keyed in on this earlier. I think one of the most common fears people have is that they feel when they get into a position of leadership, they either have to do it all or know it all. And neither of those things are true. And you do know something, right? But because we're talking about the best leadership and the capacity of things that are sometimes not things that you can necessarily teach, but you can show somebody when we're talking about empathy. Some people are just more naturally more empathetic than others, but it's a
Right.
skill you can learn by observance of people who are good leaders. So I like, Adriana, you had said earlier about the people that you lead who may have more information than you do, and there's an empowerment aspect of it that is key for a leader to understand that you don't have to know it all and you don't have to do it all. Because I think you feel that burden if you're trying to be a good leader anyway. You feel that burden of responsibility as if
Mhm.
you need to have the most weight on your shoulders, which at times it does, right? That famous quote from the comic book Uncle, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's
Hmm.
Uncle Ben,
Yes.
which it does bear out, but I think understanding that you don't have to necessarily do it all is very important. And I think one of the other fears that people have about leadership is that you're not allowed to fail. That once you
Mm.
get into a position of leadership, you're not allowed to show vulnerability or fail because it looks like, or it can be perceived as you don't have the capacity for
Mm.
your current role, or you don't have a capacity for leadership. And that those things are obviously not true because some of the greatest inventions we have and people who are leaders of industry would tell you that they got there through much failure. And yet we herald them as being tremendous individuals. And still, so for me personally, I think one of the things that is important is, I'll say first, from being in a position of leadership, is the role that leaders have to be able to identify their replacement, if you will.
Hmm.
Looking at the people that you lead, trying to identify who the leaders are. And yes, I do agree, everybody does lead, whether they like it or not. They do have a leadership capacity, but there is a factor um, of calling something out in somebody, helping them understand the capacity that they may not even see that they have. Because I think
Hmm.
what I've benefited from in my journey is having people who affirmed a leadership bent, if you will, and then stewarding that and providing me with support and resources necessary. And to this day, in fact, just before we came on, I had a conversation with Marcel, which Adriana, I know you know Marcel,
Yes,
the branch
definitely.
manager here. Yeah. So I appreciate her so much because she's a great leader and is willing to do the hard things like hold me accountable. And I think that is probably the biggest thing I've benefited from is, and so preparing to overcome those challenges and those fears would be, take a breath.
Hmm.
One of the great things I like to do, and I think my greatest asset as a leader is just the way I relate to people, because I am very flighty and forgetful. I must have the brain of a squirrel. So when we say squirrel, I think of myself because I can be all over the place. Um, but I tend to do very well with people, and having people in your corner, if you will, who are championing your cause, no matter what stage you are, whether you're a first year leader or and picking a leadership position, I suppose, specifically
Right.
for what we do here, or whether you've been at it for 8 years or so, having people who are coming alongside you. And I'll conclude my portion with this: that there is that great HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which is a uh,
Oh, yeah.
most of it's accurate, but some I think of it was embellished, retelling of Easy Company from the 101st Airborne Division during World War II. One of the coolest moments, I think, as it displays what I think good leadership is there's lots. Is there was one of the privates was in trouble with his commanding officer for what he thinks is drinking out of his canteen when he shouldn't have, and so he made him repeat a 6 mile run. And he had to get it done, and it was late at night. They'd already done the run, so he's exhausted. And basically, do it or you're out. And so this guy sends off and goes off on his thing, and as he's running, anyway, the point of view from the camera is all of a sudden two of his buddies show up and they're running alongside him. And
Hmm.
so to me, that's great leadership because they're championing his cause even in a difficult moment. They weren't responsible for his error or his mistake in this situation, but they were there running alongside him to help him achieve his goal and continue on even when he probably felt like giving up.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's very profound. I love that series. It's one of my favorite. And I watched it when it first came, and I watched it like last year because it really has a lot to show us, and to we can learn a lot about real effective leadership from there. There is another another anecdote from what who became, Mayor Winters, but he was, I think, a lieutenant and their captain,
Mhm.
who is like the guy that does Ross and Friends. I mean, he did so well his
That's
character
right.
that I hated him. I couldn't stand that guy, right? And
That's
he
right.
he lost he lost the I think there was an exercise and he got them lost, right? He was not necessarily a good leader. So the other guy, Lieutenant Winters, is the one who kind of drove the company, or drove the like his part of the company to success, because he had the clarity of what needed to be done. He
Hmm.
had that command of the situation, and he was, he had the people's back. People's had his
Hmm.
back. There was this psychological safety there that in the end is what led them to success. And that's
Hmm.
what effective leaders have to nurture and have to build from, right? It's not about showing people, hey, I am the boss and you have to do what I say. I think it's more like, because again, not everybody can be a leader. Leaders are those who another people want to follow. And in
Hmm.
order for
Right.
you to become that person, you have to really find ways that you can not manipulate, but persuade people, inspire people. That's not the easiest thing to do if you're thinking of yourself, but it's
Hmm.
becomes so much easier if you're thinking from the standpoint of, I'm in service of you. What can I do for you? How can we, set you up for success? Right?
Yeah,
So
it's
change the narrative.
yeah, so I love that you mentioned Winters because he's obviously to me, when you see someone portrayed as a who would be a good leader, he was an excellent leader. His buddies or those he led, right? Because it first introduces us to him being a lieutenant, is they knew that he had their back,
Mm,
and what they were required to do, he did. Right? He marched with them, he ran with them, he trained with them. He was one of them to them, but yet he was able to make the demarcation between, at this point, I am different, right? He was able to lead because he wasn't trying to just be their friend. He understood that if I don't fulfill my role here, separating myself, not as in I'm better than you, but I have a role to fulfill.
Mhm.
then they're going to be, in this case, they could have been hurt or killed. And obviously, thankfully, my job is never that severe, but um, there is an element of knowing your lane, if you will. And I think great leaders, those they lead know that they are there for them,
Hmm.
but they also understand that they have a role and a position to fill, and good leaders know how to make that. Um, just like you mentioned, 18-year-olds, good parenting is about making sure your kids know where boundaries are and all those other things versus just trying to be their buddy or their friend, because that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, because they have certain responsibility for the other people, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, we're moving along. So as of now, right now, we're at a good halfway point. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back to continue the conversation.
You work hard to safeguard your time and your goals to keep life running smoothly. Don't let identity fraud catch you off guard. Triangle's Better Checking with ID Protect goes beyond banking to protect you and your family from the unexpected danger of identity theft. With Better Checking, you get family coverage that protects parents and children under 25 living in your household, plus identity monitoring and expense reimbursement to make sure any setbacks don't derail your life or your family's lives. Learn more at trianglecu.org, federally insured by NCUA.
And we're back. Chit-chatting about leadership, Adriana, Kevin. I want to go right into our next question. This is more for like maybe some specifics would be awesome, for listeners. What are some resources and practices that people can incorporate into their lifestyle to learn and cultivate leadership? We already talked a little bit about this, but are there any specifics, or is there anything that you've personally found helpful yourself? It's just a chance to share that.
I want to talk about this book by Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, right? Because in that book, she emphasizes what leadership is rooted in. And she mentions that leadership is rooted in courage, vulnerability, and emotional intelligence. And I cannot emphasize enough the need to cultivate our emotional intelligence, the
Mm,
awareness of our emotions and behaviors and how others show up as well, right?
mm,
Another thing that I had to develop, and I think is very important, is having those effective communication skills, right? Including good listening skills. We have to become very good listeners, right? They're also very
mm.
vital to develop. And at the end, we as human beings, we all want to feel heard, validated, and understood, right? So if we
Yeah.
take that into account, we can really connect with people, interact with people in ways that are more connective, are
Mm,
more trusting of each other. I truly believe that we all are doing the best we can, right? That's something that I have to believe if want to step into a role of effective leadership for myself and for others. Because I know that we do our best, but it's at the level that sometimes our beliefs, our attachments, our training, our knowledge, our conditioning by society or maybe different environments that we have worked or at our life experiences, even our traumas, right?
mm.
Our motivations and so forth. That happens to all of us. So we as leaders, part of the role that we have is to develop people to be their best at higher levels, right? And the starting point is where they are at, meeting them where they are at. And it's important also to remember that leadership, and I think that Kevin touched up on this, is a privilege, is a responsibility, is not a right.
Mm.
And again, with a different analogy, I feel that it's the same like with obtaining a driver's license, right? You don't get the privilege, so you can be speeding at 100 miles per hour, cutting everybody off, taking all the red lights. I mean, you can do that, you can treat it as such, but you're not going to get many followers that way, right?
You
And
get in trouble.
yes, yes. I mean, you're gonna get in trouble, and people are not gonna be like, I want to be like him, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or
They're
like her.
reckless. They're reckless. Yeah.
Yes. So it's a responsibility that we cannot take lightly to become a leader in our life, to become a
Yeah.
leader for others, right? To be a servant leader. And it's always evolving. It is a journey. It never ends, right? We think that we're getting better. We got it all together, and always life is gonna throw us something, a
Yeah.
curveball that we're going to have to really rearrange and reassess. Okay, where are we at? Do we have any gaps in the way that we're dealing with things, you know?
Mm,
And
yeah.
that can come in a form of situations. It can come in the form of people. It can come in any form. So it's going to sound like a cliche, right? But it's important that leaders lead by example. And Kevin, you just up about this on that great story of Band of Brothers. Like he was there with them. He was doing the same thing with them. It's not do as I say and not as I do, right?
Mm,
Uh, because leaders, they're gonna need to earn the trust of their team, and they have to
Yeah.
be upfront. They have to be on the front of things. They have to show with their actions that what they are about, what they are
mm,
representing, right? So I find that there is no more powerful guide than the example that is set by a leader, right?
mm,
Another things that we talked about is empathy. That's a great trait to have as an effective leader, and also kindness. Those two things come
mm,
together.
mm,
Um, we can be nice, but nice doesn't mean that you're kind, right?
mm.
You have to use empathy. You have to use like in your shoes. I think that it's a difficult situation. The acknowledgement that hey, you have it's not like you have to do this because that's what is called from you. It's like, are you okay? People are not gonna show up 100% of the time, at 100%, right? I mean, we're human
Right.
beings, and a lot of leaders don't take into account the human factor.
Mm,
And the human factor is one of the most important things when you're a leader. Again, people can throw curveballs at us, but if we're prepared and we come from a position of, I'm trying to understand, even though I want to hold you accountable, I think that it's going to be so much more well received, right?
mm,
And again, I want to say it again that everybody can develop leadership skills because leadership is ultimately about showing up with authenticity, listening, and creating meaningful connection with other people, right? So there are some books that I recommend that I think are very useful, and they have helped me a lot. They have inspired me into developing myself, uh, to be the leader that I aspire to be. One of them is Winning Leadership by Cherry Wynn. Dare to Lead, definitely by Brené Brown. And of course, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Very
And Band
good.
of Brothers,
Very
the
good.
show.
And
Apparently,
also
that's
There you
Band of
go.
another.
Brothers, the show. We
I
have to
was just
watch
thinking that.
that.
I'm like, oh, if you're into that type of genre, yeah, it's a great
What do you
series.
have for us, Kevin?
Yeah, well said, Adriana. I really appreciate that. Um, on the practices piece of it, I think one of the key things for somebody who aspires to be a leader is you already mentioned is it helps to identify somebody that is a good leader and basically do what they do.
Mm,
But one of the things I found helpful when I was aspiring to be a leader was to operate that way as much as I could was to, and it's more than just seeing yourself in some sort of, in my mind I'm a leader, but in reality I'm not. It was trying to operate with my peers as a leader, not because I was trying to have authority over them, but because it felt important to me to distinguish myself as a leader among my peers when it came to, now I know it isn't about knowing it all, but a leader should have knowledge, right? So trying to establish yourself and operate and walk in those circles. And I would say, repeating something I said earlier, which is to get alongside somebody that's a leader in your life and pick their brain, ask them questions. In certain situations, unless they make it explicitly clear, ask them, why in this situation did you do
Mhm,
this? Why did you choose to do this?
mhm,
Um, Adriana, I appreciate that you mentioned emotional health because for anyone who listens to this podcast who is an employee of Triangle Credit Union, we have all the way from our board of directors, senior management team, down to some of the supervisors and assistant managers have followed the leadership of Patrick Lencioni, who has several books on leadership about effective leadership. But one of the things is about emotional intelligence. And this to me goes with the empathy and the kindness is, and you've mentioned trauma many times in people's environments. One of the practices you can do as someone who's trying to cultivate and grow in your leadership is to know yourself, to know that your and emotional health is about knowing how you react in certain situations, but also understanding your peers or your team as they react because your experiences are different. Adriana, the last time we talked about just some cool things from Cuba, right? And how your experience is way different than mine. And those things shape our worldview. And emotional intelligence really is not about manipulating people or trying to pull the rug over someone's eyes or the wool over or anything like that. It's about valuing the person in front of you, which is just ties back to all the things we said about leadership and how it revolves around the people that you're leading. As far as resources, I would say the Lencioni stuff is the most recent
Mm.
stuff that I've read that is valuable for leadership. The quote you read at the beginning obviously gives you some insight as to where I draw a lot of my leadership principles.
Mhm.
And I'll share that. Now, please, listeners, I know I don't want this to be divisive or anything, but the Bible for me is a resource about good leadership because it teaches you how to value people above yourself. Yeah, I would
Mm.
say that's it for me, is just recognizing who our good leaders are and trying to do the things that they do.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories, I mean, you guys mentioned Band of Brothers, and it got me thinking, like, what other instances in like life stories or histories? I'm a huge history fan. So I was just thinking about one of my I think my ultimate favorite story about leadership is Ernest Shackleton and his trek down to Antarctica.
Mhm.
I don't know if either of you are familiar with it, but it's a particular story of he led an expedition down to Antarctica, and his intention was to cross the continent, right? He wanted to be one of the first to be able to do this. So he got a bunch of men on this ship to go down. The Endurance is what it was called. And in the process, they got stuck in the ice to the point where the ship gets crushed and sinks, right? So now he's got a group of men that he has to find a way to get back to safety. Um, and the story is just, it's for me an incredible example of leadership because they managed to save a couple boats. They have their supplies, and through teamwork and through his leadership, he didn't want anyone to lose their life, and he worked extremely hard to keep everybody safe as best he could. Um, he managed to save them all. And of course, not just him, but through his skills, they remained a team. They worked together. They managed to work their way up to a tiny island, the most northern island they could get to, called Elephant Island, which was extremely hostile. There was no real, like, it was like a rock, right? And then he had to advance. Him and two other guys got in a makeshift boat they combined two boats that they had and effectively took off up the Drake Passage, which is an extremely hard area to sail through, to go to the nearest island they could get to get help. And all this while, he doesn't know if his men are surviving. They don't know if he's going to survive to get help. But it's an incredible story. Long story short, he ends up getting help. They get back to Elephant Island, and all of the men survived. Nobody lost their life. And they really credit his skills and his leadership qualities to a lot of the reason why the group didn't fall apart, you know. But anyway, there's a lot of books about it. One of my absolute favorites. I find it very inspiring. But yeah, it's definitely an example of good leadership, I think.
That's
A bit
such
of
an
a
inspiring story, yeah. And I think that, what you're saying there is that, effective leadership, good leadership saves lives. And not in every situation that's going to be the case,
Right.
right? In Band of Brothers, definitely it did.
Right.
In that situation, it did. But I think that, more accurately, more general, I think that good leadership skills, they shape lives,
mhm.
Mm,
because
yeah.
we are, in a way, products of the environments where we live in, where we interact. And that stays with us. It's the same, on the other side of the coin, the other stuff that doesn't work so well for us, that are disempowering, that are not giving us the right tools for us to shine, are going to shape us as well. So we have to really be very conscious of who we want to be in those
Mm,
situations as well,
right,
you know?
right. Yeah, and like you said, Adriana, not every situation is going to be extreme to the point where it's, life or death, but just having the skills, using those skills, serving with the purpose of serving. Many experiences in life, you can be that leader in those instances, So okay.
100%.
Oh, go ahead. Did you have another thought, Ken?
No, I was going to say 100%.
Oh,
In
yeah.
the story you shared, I'm sure when they got to Antarctica, it was a bit of a cold reception, but they got their way
Yes.
through. An icy
Nice.
reception.
And
Yes.
eyes in reception.
Great reception.
Well, I thought that I heard that there were some penguins there.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, I have one more question for you guys, Adriana particular, before we advance and close out. But okay, so this is more towards you personally because you run your own business. You're doing these podcasts with us. You're doing a lot, and you're in the process of building, these ventures you have in mind. So, how have you personally developed your own leadership skills over the years? And looking back, like, what do you think could be one of the most important lessons that you particularly learned through all this journey?
Yeah, I really like this question, Liz, and you really ask very good questions, by the way.
Thank you.
And that's one of the
She's
reasons why
amazing.
I'm excited about coming into this podcast, because I know that it's going to be a very interesting thing, and the answers have to be a par, So I think that fundamentally the understanding that I have of leadership is that it's not about ego,
Mm,
it's about service. That's a very distinctive difference. That it's a good starting point, right? Because to me, it's about finding ways to take care of others, of those around us, to inspire them to ultimately do the same,
mm,
right? And again, we have to remember that leadership is a privilege, not a right. It can be a choice that we can make in our lives, but it's a privilege to be able to be of service to others, right? To be able to gain their trust. And that's something that you see not only during at work, but only also when you're a business owner. I mean, people put their trust in you to lead them to success. That's a huge responsibility and it cannot be taken lightly,
mm,
right? So in a way, to get to the point where I am right now, I had to transform myself. I had to become the person that it takes to be, to do the things that I wanted to do. So I had to grow. I had to show up differently to be a leader. For example, I definitely had to improve my communication skills. I had to learn to be a better listener. And that's
mm,
something that maybe at the beginning was a little bit hard for me because I wanted to be able to people to hear what I had to say. But I realized that I learned so much more and I get so much more value when I just listen to people.
mm,
Because what I know, I know. I'm trying to get that new information, that different perspective that people can give me, which I don't have yet. So
mm,
we have to be good listeners that way. I also had to find the better ways to create and maintain that trust with my peers, with my clients, with the leadership teams in organization and spaces that I'm part of. Because trust is something that is not something that people are going to give you for free, not necessarily. You have to earn it, and you have to
right.
earn it every day with those actions that you take. Even if you make mistakes,
Mm,
acknowledging the mistake, not getting defensive and saying, you know what, my bad. That was not a good thing for me to do. And I'm sorry. This was my intention because impact and intention are two different things. The way that we do
mm,
things with the best of the intentions, not necessarily is going to be received that way. So
mm,
that's something that we have to keep in mind as well, right? And again, I had to develop a lot of my emotional intelligence. And all these things that I'm talking about, that I'm mentioning, are things that are always in progress, right? We never end growing into these traits. It's something that is a journey still, right? But being more vulnerable, with myself and with others, and using what I call assertive language.
Hmm.
Assertive language is communicating with people and interacting with them in a way that not only serves your own needs, but you're also considering taking into account the other person's needs. So you want to get into a scenario that you create a win-win situation, right? So that's assertive language. That's very useful
Hmm.
for when you really want to interact with people so they see that, hey, she's not only looking out for her, she's also looking out for me, right? That's very important. And I really had to step out there, be more courageous. I had to step into the unknown many times, and I still continue to do that. But this is something that is anchored by my purpose, right? I still know what my purpose is.
Hmm.
And one of the most important lessons that I have about leadership is derives actually from the philosophy of lean continuous improvement, which is what I'm coaching on people because I believe that these are universal tools. It's not only a methodology; it becomes a philosophy. The way that you think, the way that you do things, the way that you practice, the way that you use your critical thinking to be a problem solver, right? And this is something that I realize with that change is inevitable,
Hmm.
right? And most of the change that happens, we cannot control. So if you really want to inspire people to follow your lead throughout the changes, you have to really model continuous reflection on how you show up, what you do, what are you about, right? And continue the self-improvement. You also have to lead with a clear purpose, right? You have to make learning your core identity. Learning is something that doesn't stop. Learning is continuous because change is inevitable, right?
Love that.
Uh, mhm. And I want to give you an example that is very recent. Like early this year, a lot of organizations, mostly nonprofit organizations like SCORE, that I belong to SCORE, I'm a volunteer and an SME there. They have to pivot. They have to change the ways that they did things at the beginning of the year, and SCORE was definitely not an exception. So what we did there is when we went back to the basics, right? We examined our values, our purpose, our mission, and they remain the same still. Maybe the way that we're executing them is different, right?
Hmm.
But they are still being executed in ways that are going to support small businesses, that are going to support the mission that SCORE has. The same thing I'm doing with my business, right? I realized that these universal tools can be used for different situations. I mean, they're very good for when change happens because they really help people be more flexible, be more adept to change, and embrace change as the way to drive us to a better level, of existence, what I call the future desirable state, right? Out of the current state into a future desirable state. So I had to really leverage these tools and this philosophy in order to adapt to the new world that we're living in right now. But we still can live our purpose through that. And to me, being able to do that, that can show us that we can show up as leaders, as truly effective leaders in any situation.
Kevin, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just a couple, and then they're not even thoughts. Just to answer the question the way you have it out there, I would say for me, how have I personally developed? I think it was necessary for there to be a process of personal growth from just simple maturity to the responsibility piece of it is that stepping into a place of leadership, you have to be willing to accept some of the natural changes that are going to occur from taking on a position of leadership. You can't act or conduct yourself in the same way before. You mentioned about becoming 18, right? When you're a kid, you act a certain way, you talk a certain way, but when you become an adult, you can't act like a child anymore. You can't talk like a child. So there's a natural development that needs to occur when you become a leader. So um, that is how I've personally developed myself. And then the most important lesson I think that I've learned is be willing to accept criticism and not take it personally
Mm.
necessarily. Some of the greatest growth moments I've had were in some of the hardest conversations I've had with people who were supervisors or leaders in my life. And um, I think initially it was defensiveness, or initially it was maybe taking an offense to what was said, but a smart leader will evaluate what's being said when it's critical and receive what is appropriate and let go what isn't.
Hmm.
And from those moments of receiving hard things, or um, however, even if it was delivered poorly, I've grown tremendously through those things because I stopped and just evaluated what was being said and received the areas I needed to grow.
Yeah, because it is personal development ultimately too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Starts with us, right?
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Okay. Did you have any concluding thoughts, Adriana, or should we segue right into our final
Yeah,
segment?
I mean, if I have just a little
Yeah,
thought that,
absolutely.
for us to kind of like be aware that we all have our most valuable resources that are at our disposal, right? Our time, our effort, the use of our talent. And we get to decide how we want to use this. And we get also to decide how we want to use these valuable resources in leadership, practicing leadership. So we want to make sure that we become those empowered problem solvers. There's so many complex problems in life and in the world. And if we, each one of us, focuses on trying to be that empowered problem solver, the world is going to be a better place to live at. And really, I really love to support people in different aspects of their life, in different process of their life, because I want them to be able to get empowered to design the life that
Mhm.
they desire. And that's part of the reasons why I want to do this. I want to be of service to people in this way. So thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been a tremendous experience. I think I'm going to be thinking about this throughout the whole day. And there's so many different things that we can take out of this if we want to do like a little bit of getting deeper into some of these things that we touched up on. But it's important for us to show up in ways of service to others. I think is
Mhm.
not only good for them, it's also good for us and good
Mhm.
for the world. Let's think about the collective and the world, what we need right now. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having on, Adriana. So there's so much that you have to share and you have to offer to all of our listeners, and we just love having these conversations with you.
Thank
So,
you. I hope to continue.
absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah,
A lot of good stuff there.
yeah.
Thanks.
At this time, so we have our final segment, which is the rapid fire segment. I believe you're familiar with this already, right, Adriana?
I am.
Okay, woohoo! So Kevin's going to facilitate it for you this time. And I'm hoping, Kev, I don't know if you knew the questions we asked way back, but who knows? Maybe they'll
Well,
be the
we're
same
about to,
questions or maybe they'll be different. We'll see.
Are they
yeah.
different or they're the same
I'm
ones?
guessing they're different, but
Okay. Go ahead,
I
Kevin.
hope, yeah, I hope some of them are different. Some of them may be the same because I'm unfamiliar with the questions you were asked the
right.
last time. And some of these are personal choice because I just find them to be funny and they're cultural, I suppose. So I'm curious on people's input or their answer to this question. All right, first one. Are you an Apple person or an Android person?
Android.
Okay, right on. You can keep coming on then.
Okay, I did it. Oof. Oh
She's
my
like, I didn't
goodness.
know it was a test.
I'm
No,
sorry, it was a
that's
50-50 guess.
I'm just being funny. That's trolling just for the sake of humor. Okay, I trust you use social media. So, what is your social media of choice?
I think LinkedIn. LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Okay.
Yeah.
Why LinkedIn?
LinkedIn because it has actually evolved over the years. Like, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, it was like you put yourself there, you have a profile because you're gonna try to find a job. Now is much more than that. People can make real connections in there.
Hmm.
Okay, good to know. I think I was sleeping on that one a little bit. So,
Okay.
okay, are you a warm weather or cold weather kind
Definitely
of
summer.
person?
Okay.
Def-
Repeat that question again. Yeah.
All right. Well, follow up for you on that one. So, if you're a warm weather person, what would be your perfect vacation?
Okay, so I am definitely a warm weather person. My favorite season here in the Northeast is summer. I know a lot of people say it's hot. I complain too, but that heat is golden for me. My favorite vacation is somewhere along a beach. I love the ocean.
Okay. All right. Are you a heels or flats kind of person?
I used to be a heels person, but not anymore. I think I have grown into being comfortable in my own skin, and my shoes have to be part of that.
All right. So, are you in or out on Crocs?
I use them for camping,
Okay.
maybe to use their showers, and that's about it.
Again, I was sleeping on Crocs a bit because I think they might look a bit unorthodox, but when I picked one up for the first time, realizing how light they were, and then you see the functionality and the practicality of them. So I get you on that one. And then the last question I had for you for today, which is, what is your ideal use of free time? If you had several hours where you could do whatever you wanted, how would you use that?
Well, definitely a little bit of self-development, reading and going out into nature. And I'm a foodie. I love to try new and different cuisines. I love to try all different kind of foods. So yeah, that's how I will spend my free hours.
What is the most interesting food that you've tried recently?
Recently, um, I do like, I do like Nepalese food. Is is
Hmm.
is similar to Indian, but it has its own out um its own flavor, They put a lot of different things there. I think that recently that's the food that I really like.
Hmm. Cool.
Awesome.
Well, that's all I got, Liz.
No, that's great. That's
Okay.
great. We learned a lot about more, and not many of them were repeats. I think I remember the LinkedIn one from way back, but Kevin, I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It
Okay.
was all good.
Now it's out in the
Because I know you're very active on LinkedIn, right? Adriana, you post a
yeah, yeah.
lot, and yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
see a lot of
Facebook
those
is good
posts.
too. Facebook, I go to some groups. I have my own page on Facebook and a little group that I haven't nurtured very much. I have to be, honest about that. But other than that, LinkedIn is my place to go. Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's out there that I'm an Android person. I don't know if a lot of people are gonna unfriend me because of that, but what are
Oh,
you gonna
the Android and yeah.
Yeah.
No.
It's only important to some people. Most people don't really care. It's only important to them. But you get those, I'm sure you've had those conversations where you get people who are
Yeah,
passionate
yeah.
about one or the other.
Well,
Yeah.
they're gonna have to examine their attachments. Yeah.
Well, okay, guys, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. Thank you, Adriana, for hopping on the call. Hopefully next time we can be back in the studio and record, the next one in person. So, but again, we're
Yeah.
grateful to have this platform to be able to continue on with these recordings. So, again, thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
Th- Thank you to both of you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I like the triage. I mean, I like the three people and back and forth. I really enjoyed that. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys, and have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend, okay? Be well.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That wraps up this episode of the Making Money Personal podcast. If you've enjoyed today's show, we would love to hear from you. Email your thoughts about this show or any other ideas at tcupodcast@trianglecu.org. Thank you to all of our subscribers, and if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss out on any new episodes or money tips. Thank you for listening and have a great day.